For Yemenis young and old, a ceasefire can't come soon enough. As many as 18 million people, more than half the country, are close to starvation. 4 years of conflict have brought Yemen to its knees.
We have no shelter. We have nothing. We don't even have water. Our children are sick.
Doctors just can't keep up with the number of malnourished patients.
We receive 25 malnutrition cases every single week. Our capacity here is very limited.
Renewed fighting flared up in the port city of Hodeidah late Monday, but the UN is pushing ahead with its efforts to broker peace talks between the warring parties. The Yemeni government has said it would send a delegation to talks. And that came after Houthi rebels said they'd stop missile attacks on Saudi Arabia, the Yemeni government's major backer. But as ever in this conflict, skepticism remains.
I believe this is just a way for the Saudi-led coalition to establish an excuse for themselves and abandon their obligations. The coalition will not stop the aggression. The aggressors do not usually stop, and they see these sorts of ceasefire agreements as a sign of weakness.
The UN hopes these suspicions are proved wrong and that fighting around the key battleground of Hodeidah is soon stopped for good. Beyond that, Yemen needs a long-term plan for peace. And even with all sides at the table, that will be a major challenge.
We're joined now by Tamer Kirolos from the charity Save the Children in Sana'a in Yemen. Tamer, thank you so much for joining us here on DW. As we said, there was fresh fighting in Hodeidah. This is a very important port city. What does this mean for the millions of Yemenis who are reliant on food aid?
Well, it is a very dangerous situation, of course. This is the third escalation since July. The city now is almost encircled. There's only one main route out. And obviously the port supplies 80% of the supplies for Yemen, including obviously much needed food aid and fuel, but also commercial food and fuel as well. But it's not just about that. I mean, I guess the situation right now in the city is also quite dire. There had been a lull for the last few days, but fighting resumed last night, and this morning we've heard from our staff there's still airstrikes. We've seen hospitals destroyed. We've seen a large number of civilian casualties, both dead and injured, especially with children. In the last 10, 15 days, we've had to support about 15 children that have been injured because of shrapnel or bullets. And even yesterday, we heard that some of the suppliers of food in the city have pulled out their stocks for fear of the fighting, which creates a really dire situation for about 300,000 people still trapped in the city.
Tamer, we are hearing that more aid is coming. It's been reported that Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates will contribute around $500 million in a new aid program for Yemen. But will that make a difference if the fighting can't be stopped?
No, and I think this is the critical issue. The figures we're working on right now in terms of 8.5 million people who are extremely food insecure, meaning they don't know where their next meal is coming from. They are reliant on aid. But again, figures coming out closer to the end of this month will show that the numbers have increased by millions. I think at one point it's not just about the money, but obviously about stopping the conflict, but it's also about our capacity to respond. And I think if we reach a tipping point where many more million Yemenis are food insecure or perhaps even pushed to beyond the brink of famine, it'll be very difficult for us to be able to respond and to roll that back.
Tamer, on the diplomatic front, just briefly, if you can, the UN Security Council is going to discuss a draft resolution later today. How hopeful are you that we're going to see an end to the fighting?
Well, it's rather than being hopeful, it's more of hoping. I guess the issue, again, that there is no viable solution to this conflict except through peaceful negotiations. The alternative is catastrophic. This is the world's worst humanitarian crisis. And if the fighting continues, not just around Hodeidah, but elsewhere in the country, we could see that situation get even worse.
All right, Tamer Kirolos from Save the Children in Sana'a. Thank you so much for joining us.